Hello and welcome to BusyWorksBeats.com. We're continuing the free mixing course that I promised you because you guys voted. I think it's 3,000 votes or something. You guys wanted a free mixing and mastering course. So this is what this is all about. Today we're going to focus on delay and reverb. And I'm going to show you how to use delay, not only like ding, 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 but like how to use creative delay to widen things, where reverb comes from, the difference between delay and reverb, the different types of reverb. We'll get into it. Let's hop into the DAW. And I just want to thank you guys for being so supportive for this free course here on YouTube. So to demonstrate delay, I'm going to use a simple sine wave that's plucky. Now with this pluck sound, I'm going to run it through different delays to show you what delay is and how the ear perceives psychoacoustics. So the first thing you need to understand about delay is that delay is time-based. It's a time-based effect. Many effects come from this simple concept of delay. Phasers, flangers, delay, reverb, all come from time-based changes, okay? And pitch-based changes as well. So we're gonna run this through the first delay. Now here's the normal delay you're used to hearing. It just repeats or echoes what we play. Okay, so in this case, we're gonna use Fruity Delay 3 to demonstrate. It's set to, what is this, 4 beats of time, and it's at the tempo sync, and it's just set to feedback a certain amount of echoes or repeats. So when you see the feedback knob on a delay, it's how many times it echoes back something. Now think about a normal room. In your normal room, the speed of sound is 300, I want to say 40 meters per second. You could double check that. But basically when my voice speaks, it goes in every direction and it has a certain speed. So if you're looking at this image here, if I'm the person in the middle, it takes time for my vocal to go from my mouth to the wall, the blue section, and then back to my mouth. That's called a feedback because it's bouncing off the wall in an elastic collision and it's coming back to my ears in this case. So sound takes time. So I'm speaking, it goes to a wall, it bounces back, and then it hits my ear at a different angle. That's also very important. Your mouth is in the middle, your ears on the side. And also your ears are, depending on how your ears are positioned, your ears can be like forward, like Will Smith, or they could be more pent back, which means you're not capturing as much frequency. And as far as high frequency content, you're not capturing that as the sound bounces back. So essentially, if the sound goes out of your mouth to a wall and back to you, it actually is a little more muffled on the way back. Depending on the material, also, it depends on the type of room and material, but that's how reverb is built. It goes, okay, we're simulating an equation. I have a voice that goes out to a wall, bounces back, passes my ear with a subtle low pass filter like this, then it bounces off the back wall, then it bounces off the side wall, then it bounces off the front wall, and then back to my ear again. Now, what happened to the sound in that whole round trip? The sound lowered in volume because depending on the materials in a room, a sound doesn't just keep bouncing forever. If that was the case, then you would hear sounds that you made 10 years ago in your room, but that's not the case. Sound dies down over time, depending on the material that it captures the energy. Okay, so delay, the reason I'm showing you this is because delay, to hear delay, we need about 20 milliseconds of a time difference. Okay, so let's play a little melody in here. To demonstrate this, I'm going to turn off tempo sync. This will allow you to add millisecond values to your delay. In the top left of FL, it tells you the value. So it says 1 millisecond delay. I'm going to turn the feedback all the way down. This means that we will only hear one instance of this reverb, one echo. Okay, so if I turn the wet level all the way up and the dry level all the way up, I'm hearing the original sound and then I'm hearing the delay sound. So you'll notice that as I increase the time, you will start to perceive delay. Now to make this even more evident, I'm going to pan the delay to the right so that we can hear the timing. So you can't hear the timing, you just hear this weird phasey noise. That's called wave cancellation. Now as I turn up the time, you hear more phasiness. That's where phasers and flangers live, in the 1 milliseconds up to 20 millisecond range. Still sounds phasey. Sounds wider, a little bit wider. Now our ear, the way it's built is basically if something plays in the left ear at the same volume and same time as the right ear, we perceive it as happening in the middle. Okay, so mono is actually an illusion, or center is actually an illusion our brain creates because we have 2 ears, but our brain synthesizes that middle portion because it's equal volume on the left and the right. So our brain thinks it's in the middle. Okay, so what's happening here is that I have a different timing on the right. So there's a change between my left and the right ear. My ear starts to pick that up. Now I'm more seasoned in this craft, so I'm hearing it earlier, whereas most people, average listeners, they only hear it around 20 milliseconds. So I'm increasing it. We're at about 7 milliseconds right now of delay between the left and the right ear. Or center and right, I should say. Now at 20 milliseconds, it starts to sound like delay. Anything before 20 milliseconds, we usually use to widen a sound. I'll show you how to do all this, but I just want to show you the time constants. Now it sounds like delay. You hear like an echo. And it's right around that 20 millisecond mark. So the same way in compression, how negative 20 dB is that magical threshold point that usually works for everything. With delay, 20 milliseconds is that starting point for when we hear delay. Now, as I increase it, beyond 20 milliseconds, it's very obvious that we have a delay plugin. Now, certain plugins have tempo sync, so it will lock it to the tempo of your track, and it will calculate the times per beat of that specific tempo. So in this case, if I pull this all the way back to 1 beat, it will wait 1 beat and then bounce to the right. Okay, so that's tempo sync. It's more quantized of a time. And then if you have it off tempo sync, you get more of a wide spread, unique sound, more analog, I'll say analog sound. Now let's get into what is feedback. So if I crank up, let's go below 20 milliseconds. Now if I increase the feedback, remember these are the echoes that are happening. So if I increase this, you'll start to hear a weird resonance and phasey tone because it's starting to stack up on top of itself, okay, at a very short amount of time, which increases the waveform in volume. See how it starts to sound tinny if I pull it all the way up? And that's because of wave cancellation and wave addition as well. And this is where comb filtering type of sound effects come in, and this is where different flangers, depending on what's type. Now, rarely do I ever push feedback that high at such a low timing. So if I increase this to a normal speed, feedback just says how long does it keep doing the delay effect, basically. Okay, if I let go, how long will it have a tail? If I turn it all the way up, it keeps the volume higher for a longer period of time. It doesn't just flatten out faster. It doesn't decay faster. Okay, so let's get into how to use this delay for multiple things. I'm going to show you a couple advanced techniques. So again, we have a dry signal, meaning untouched. Then we have a wet signal, meaning only the delay effect. What you can do is create, for example, a ping pong delay or a left and right delay. I'll exaggerate the panning here. So that's what ping pong means. It's going between the left and the right ear at different times. Okay, so what I'm going to do is use the ping pong delay, and I'm going to lower and take it off tempo sync. So now our ear really can't tell where it's coming from. And here we're going to use what's called modulation of pitch or time modulation. This will change the pitch per echo going back and forth. And remember, our ear can detect change between our two ears. So what this creates is a widening effect, a chorusy widening effect. Now, depending on your feedback, that will determine how much chorusy sound you get. You can also pull your feedback all the way down and your delay time all the way down and just use the time modulation here. It's a nice sound. It creates a chorusy sound. Now, if I turn this off, the dry level off, we only have the delay. So here's what the delay is doing. Now, what I'll do is I'll exaggerate this effect so you can really, really hear it. Listen to the pitch of the delay. It's going up and down. Let me change the rate to make it super obvious. It's doing this. Okay, so what we're doing is combining that wobbly signal at a slower rate. And then what we're doing is combining that with the original. So every time we get an echo, it's changing the pitch. And so it feels like we're detuning a sound. Same way you would detune a sawtooth to make a nice wide super saw. Now this is more chorusy. You would use your delay time in this case to make it. Now ping pong allows you more width. Okay, so you're doing left right panning in this case. Now it sounds like a widening effect using delay. So it doesn't sound like an echo, it just sounds like a widening effect. Now I'm going to show you how to, we can go deeper in this plugin specifically, but every plugin doesn't have every setting here, so I'm not going to show you everything. But let's just go to regular delay. And remember, I said that depending on the type of collision a sound has with the wall, it may muffle the sound. That's why certain people put rock wool in the wall to muffle the sound. So when it comes back, it has less energy, less intensity. Okay, so there's certain materials that absorb sound, basically, is what I'm saying. But if I'm speaking on concrete, it's going to bounce right off the concrete because it has so much mass and it's going to come right back to me. Okay, so that's, I'm not going to get into the science of acoustic treatment. But what I'm going to do at this point is we did the widening effect first. Now I'm going to show you like when you add a low pass filter to your delay, what that sounds like. Now there's so much to teach you, but basically a sound has a height. Let's go full screen for this one. Okay, sound has a height. So lower frequencies are at the lower part of an image of the sound, whereas higher frequencies are at a higher part of the sound. So if you want to push something to the back as far as depth, something you could do that's super simple is add a low pass filter to it. So it's not so upfront in your face. Also volume, we're going to get deeper into it, but volume is another element of pushing something further or away. So now what I'm going to do is have it delay, but this time it's coming back with a subtle muffle to it, which is emulating real life, bouncing off of a wall, losing energy, coming back to your ear. Okay, so this is why we have a low pass filter built into this delay specifically. And also we're helping to rest this delay effect behind the original signal, so we're not getting it clashing as far as perception. Now let's go full wet level to show you what it sounds like with just the delay signal. So it's pretty muffled. Adding in the original now. Now if I lower the delay speed, we're getting more of a realistic response off of a wall. And then in real life, the levels would not be the same because just like a roller coaster, the highest point you go to is, unless you add mechanics, the highest point of a roller coaster is the highest you'll ever go on a roller coaster because what is called potential energy. So if you go to the top of a roller coaster, if it had no more pulling mechanisms, that's as high as you can go. So I'm going to the top of a roller coaster coming down. You could have another hill, but it won't be as high as the first. So the same thing here, the volume won't be the same on the second echo off the wall. So in this case, we will lower that volume to mirror real life. And now it just sounds like this sound is somewhat in a room. Now, if I did the math to figure it out, again, sound moves at 340 meters per second. So I would have to measure where I'm at right now, how far my wall is, and the math to hear the sound, how many milliseconds would pass. I didn't do that math. So I'm just going to type in an arbitrary value. Okay, and remember, a sound will go forward. It's actually going in every direction. So this is only one equation of many. But a sound will bounce off of a wall and your left and your right ear are subtly panned from your middle position. So in this case, the sound will be panned both left and right coming back to my ear. So be slightly panned a little bit. You ever hear a sound and you're like, wow, that sounds like it's coming from my computer, but you're listening over your headphones? This is how we create that psychoacoustic sound. So that's the really advanced explanation of delay. Let me show you how to stack delays to create really unique textures. So I'm going to show you the hands-on how to. So let's say we want a nice bouncy delay for rhythm. Okay, we're going to use ping pong to make these, get out of the way, so to speak. Going to muffle them so they're not interfering with the original signal. I'm going to turn up the feedback a little bit to have a nice tail to the effect. Okay, now I want another delay, but I want this other delay to be a widening effect. Now I'm going to add it before this effect that we just created. Okay, let's turn it on. So let's do dry and wet. And then we're going to turn our feedback down. Delay time, we're going to turn off tempo sync so that we're not locked to the BPM. And then we're going to pull the time down, okay? And then we're going to turn it on ping pong mode and pan this out. And give it a subtle pitch change. I'm going to add a low pass filter just for tone. For this one to be heard as far as the left and right ping, we have to turn up a little bit of feedback because it's only giving us one echo. So I'm turning up the feedback just to allow that 2 echo response. Now we're widening out the sound on top of creating our like chorusy sound that we created before. Rhythmic sound. Okay, now let's add another delay and make this one a longer tail delay, but pitch bending delay. Let's turn up the time. So I'm going to turn up the time value so it doesn't trigger right away. It repeats. It goes 1, 2, 3. So it listens to the whole phrase. Let's add that low pass filter. Let's make it ping pong so it gets out the way of the middle. So give it a lot of time modulation, which is pitch effect. Now, this is before we added all these effects. Here's width. Let's add another delay. Then I'll show you how to stack all these up to create a pseudo reverb effect in what's called delay bank. And then we'll move into reverb after this. So delay at this point is just, if you want to take it to a more advanced level, it's about the timing of the delay responses coming back. I just don't want to bore you to tears with all the settings because those are the fundamentals of delay. Let's switch it up. Let's do a high pass filter. Let's add some resonance so it has more tone. You can also have delay be mono so it's centered. So this is the delay I'm working on. Let's put it on bandpass so it's only one frequency band. All right, so again, we could be here all day doing this. Let's add all the delays. Now again, if you have things happening at the same time, you're going to get wave interference causing a phase effect. So because I have the ping pong delays going in the same direction at the same time, I'm going to flip flop them so they go opposite and have less cancellations going on. Now I'm going to show you how to stack up delays in what's called a delay bank to create pseudo reverb. Again, reverb is a lot of movement. Remember, our sound goes out and it comes back at many different angles. It's not just one angle. So to create that effect in Fruity Delay Bank, what we can do is set different time values per delay. So in this case, we would have one delay. The feedback would be normal feedback. I forget all the time variables in this one. We're going to take it off tempo sync. And let me pan this delay so I can actually hear. There we go. Now, the number one thing I need to do is turn off feedback. Okay, so we don't want feedback. But we do want one response. So I'm trying to figure out where our feedback value is. So let me find it and I'll pause the video. All right, so again, certain plugins have different names for it, but right here we have a feedback volume. So if I turn this to 1%, it's a little subtle, but you'll hear this delay in your left ear. So that's only the delay happening. So let's pull back the delay time. Again, let's stack these up. So let's do it in 10 millisecond increments. Let's do one delay on the left side at 10 milliseconds, and we'll have it at this feedback level. I'll pull it down a little bit lower so it doesn't get too crazy. We'll do 1% each. Okay, so let's do 1%. My cursor can't get it. Okay, let's copy this value. Okay, so that's panned to the left, only one echo. I have this set to wet level so we hear only the delay signal. Let's turn it on 2. Let's pan it to the right this time and give it 20 milliseconds. Let's take it off tempo sync, put it on 20 milliseconds. I'm reading that value in the top left. So I'm just going to roughly get to around 20 milliseconds. We're going to paste the same feedback, and this time it's on the right side. So if I turn off delay 1, now it's subtle. So let me turn it up. This is what's happening on the right side. And again, this is what's happening on the left side. Oh, you know, this is the panning for the entire. Okay, so I think the feedback panning is different than this panning. So let's reset those values. Let's do this. There we go. Now we have the panning situated. Now you have somewhat of a wide sound because you have a time difference between your left and your right. So hopefully you're seeing these principles stack up. I'm going to pull it to a more subtle value so we don't get caught up in that conundrum. Okay, so again, let's pan this one to the left. 30 milliseconds this time. Take it off tempo sync. Let's do 30 milliseconds. I'll actually do this without you watching me do the tedious stuff, but I'm basically doing the same exact thing, just 10 milliseconds, left, right, left, right, left, right. So I'll do this and come back to the video. So now I have 5 delays active and they're all at different panning positions. Now I'm going to increase the feedback time so that you can actually hear it. It's very subtle right now. You would not hear it. So I'm going to increase these so that you guys can actually hear it at home. And this allows you to create a really unique delay. Now, as I increase the feedback volume, it sounds more like we're in this kind of basement room. That's because of all those delays and different things. Now, I didn't even add filters yet. Now, if I increase these time values, I'm going to exaggerate some of these time values. Now the sound is bouncing around at different increments. And this is what creates the illusion of space. It's panning and it echo responses back. And all those combined equals reverb. Now reverb is really complex. There are many different types of reverb. I don't have time to go through every single type of reverb. It would take way too long. But what I can do is show you reverb that a lot of people like to use and common things. So here's vintage verb. A lot of people love this reverb. Now, when you add reverb, the biggest mistake I see beginners make is they'll add it directly on a track and they'll turn the mix level all the way up to 100, or they'll even use 50-50. The problem is you have an original sound being buried by a reverb sound, and it becomes a seesaw effect to where in order for the delay to exist, the reverb to exist, it's taking away from the original signal. So what you want to do with reverb is a little bit different. Usually speaking, you don't add direct reverb. It's going to be on a different channel or a different track. And where we at? So the concept you need to learn here, I don't want to go so advanced for the beginners, but we are going to send a duplicate of this sound to a reverb. Okay, in FL Studio, you just click the up arrow at the bottom to send a copy of a channel to another channel with this little up arrow thing. Now, what I do on this second channel, this is completely a duplicate of the original sound. So what I'll do is I'll have an original sound, a duplicate. The duplicate will be distorted, whereas the original sound stays the same. And all I want to do is just turn up the volume up or down with the duplicate of the sound. This allows me a lot more control over the delay, or the reverb. So let me just show you what direct reverb sounds like and then what aux reverb sounds like. So here's direct reverb. Most people just add reverb and they just wash out their sound. Sounds cool, but you might not want the sound. That's a direct reverb. Now, as you lower the mix level, of course, it's going to open up the dry signal. but it's still taking away from the dry signal. I would just recommend not using reverb directly on a track. It's not a hard rule. It's just something that, also I had it going through there, so that's not fair. Let's do that again. I had it going through the aux. So let's do direct. So see how heavy it sounds, even at 20%. And it's a balance beam between the original sound and the reverb. So to, mitigate that type of battle, what you could do is just send the sound as a duplicate to another channel and have that channel focus on being the reverb channel. Now I can use either the send amount or the fader to dictate how much reverb I want the sound to have. And I can have a lot more control over the reverb. Another thing we usually do with reverb is cut out the lows and the highs. It depends on the type of reverb. It's not a hard rule, but a lot of energy builds up on the sides with reverbs and people don't monitor it. And a reverb can really muddy up a track if you don't manage the frequencies that come from the reverb. So I usually cut out the lows and the highs of a reverb just to contain it and keep it under control for the mix. Now let's add all these effects together, delay and reverb. Now I have like 17 reverbs going. Let me shape the sound a little bit more here. Okay, so it takes bland sounds and makes them sound better. We can get into a lot of different things. I just didn't want to overwhelm you with a bunch of instruments and a bunch of concepts because it gets complex very fast. So I use that simple sound. Hopefully you understand the difference between delay and reverb. If you want more specific, I forgot one thing. Here's a little bonus thing. So if you want to push a sound, I'm going to use some of the loops from LA Crisis. We have a pack coming out called Intuition. I really love this loop. Let's go to 115 BPM. It doesn't matter the BPM, but it helps any kind of programmatic calculations. Okay, so let's send this to the mixer, hit Control L. Now he has stuff already built into the loop, but if you wanted to add more reverb, what you could do is just send this as a duplicate to your reverb with the up arrow right here. Now for samples like this, another cool effect you could do is add reverb directly onto the sound to wash it out. So I'll show you what that sounds like. Let's add this directly to the sample. This is more for like hip hop people who want to push the sample all the way to the back and create that wall of sound. You would have a mix level of 100 and you would set your reverb accordingly. So now it feels like a wall of just ambiguous ambient sound. So I would cut out the lows. And now it just sounds like a musical atmosphere as opposed to a sample. And this is really good to put behind your tracks and you can add more music to the track. So it gives you a nice big image. So that's one technique. You can also switch the type of reverb. It doesn't have to be that huge hall reverb sound. So again, these are all different calculations of the speeds off the wall coming back to the microphone. So that's where you get hall reverb versus plate reverb versus room reverb. They all have different times that they bounce off the wall. That's where these different modes come from. This one's a little more tight and controlled. This one's like washy sounding. So they're all different flavors. I like the plate one for this sample. Okay, so that's 100% reverb. Now what I want to do with this is just, as a normal reverb, I'm going to send it as a duplicate to the reverb we set up earlier. It's just going to give it a little more tail to the sound, make it sound bigger. A lot of your favorite tracks from like the 90s and the 80s and stuff utilize a ton of reverb. Now I'm going to show you a technique. This is the last one for today because I'm running out of breath. This technique here can be used to push a sound to the back of the mix. So let me grab a drum loop. I'm going to pause the video. Okay, I've added a piano melody, and what I want to show you how to do is take the main piano and keep it in front, but push the sample to the back. So what we can do is use Reverb to do this. Let's open up Fruity Reverb 2 as an example. Then I'll show you the plugin that I really like, which is called Reverb from Universal Audio. Also, I've heard True Verb sounds really good from Waves. Okay, so I'll do both. So on Fruity Reverb 2, what we can do now is use early reflections. Remember that room picture that I talked about? Sound takes time to get back to the ear. If I speak, sound bounces off the wall, comes back after the elastic collision. It comes back to my ears at a different volume and a different form because it's been muffled by the material, and it's going to be lesser in volume because the wall absorbs some of that energy depending on the type of material in that wall. So what we can do now is push the sound back to create these fake psychoacoustic early reflections using that same philosophy. What we can do now is use the early reflections to trick the ear and push it back. So what I'm going to do is pull back the dry level, pull back the wet level, which is the long tail part of the reverb, and only use that front to back off the closest walls to me reverb called early reflections. It's called early reflections because it's the early, it's the first, I'll say, one of the first echoes off the wall reflecting off of that wall. So that's where early reflection comes from. Let's turn this up. So what this is doing, this will push the sample further and further back. It's giving depth to the sound. I'm going to turn it all the way up. So now the sample feels like it's in the back somewhere. I'll turn it up a little bit. Now without it, it's going to fight with the main sample, the main melody, I should say. So let me show you what you need to understand is the dry. So let's go dry first, then I'll turn up the early reflections, and then I'll lower the dry level. So this is unaffected signal. See how it fights with the main piano? Let's turn up the early reflections. And now let's turn down the dry level. Now the sample's not fighting. It's there, but it's not fighting the piano. I'm going to exaggerate this. We give it a little more level. Now again, this is exaggerated early reflection, so let's pull this back a little bit, add some dry signal. So this is how you add that perceived depth to your track and create room for your melody over top of samples. Now let's add this piano through some reverb, give it life. Let's try both the reverb types, the early reflection and the what is this? The wall of reverb. So here's the wall of reverb sound. A little distracting. Still fighting with the sample, funny enough. And let's add the depth effect. Okay, so that's how you can blend your samples with other songs. Again, this stuff goes really advanced, but once you understand those fundamentals, you're pretty much set as far as your delay and reverb. This video is pretty long, but I want you to like the video, share it with your friends. Again, you guys asked for a free mixing course, so I'm going to break it down into these easy to follow steps, and I need you to share with your friends so we can help as many people around the world as possible. Subscribe if you're new, like the video, and leave a comment and share with your friends. All right, do all those social currency things. I appreciate you. It's Game from BusyWorksBeats.com. Peace.